welcome back to my classroom. We almost never get to film in here anymore because I'm almost never alone anymore. Yeah, like it's just a different school year. I share my space with different people and we often overlap. And so I just don't have a good space to film here in my classroom anymore. But today I do because things happen, life. And so I thought that I would do a little check-in with Victober. So I finished, and I don't have a book for it because I only listened to it on audio, but I finished The Hound of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle. I finished listening to that. That was my first Victober finish, and it was so good. I was so surprised. I couldn't believe how humorous it was. It kept making me laugh out loud. I thought it would be very dry, but it just wasn't. It had a little bit of creepy vibes, but not too creepy. And just in general, it was quite a delight. I really enjoyed it. It was a good start to Victober. I now own the Stephen Fry, reading the whole collection of Sherlock Holmes. And so I think every Victober now I'll listen to another Sherlock Holmes. I kind of jokingly in my TBR said, maybe this will start a love of Sherlock Holmes, and I kind of think it did. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I was very pleasantly surprised by the humor and just the liveliness of the storytelling. It was fun and really great. I truly, truly enjoyed it. And listening to Stephen Fry read anything is always a joy. So good move. I also finished a short story by Sheridan J. LeFanu, which was very weird. I can't remember what the title of it is, but I listened to it on audio. It was just about an hour long. I'll put a picture of it here. It's like a chapter in the something family. I don't remember. But it's about bigamy and it's pretty creepy and it's pretty intense. It's very scandalous. Very scandalous. Super fast-paced, short story, so I really can't tell you much about it because whatever premise I would set up for you would really ruin what happens. But it is about bigamy, I'll tell you that. So that was fun. That was a fun second read. I am also well into Wuthering Heights, but I'm not going to say a word because I'm going to do a special Wuthering Heights standalone video. I'm almost done with it, but I want to do one that establishes why and how I love this book and why I think it is a love story. So totally look for probably before I release this, a standalone video about Wuthering Heights. I am also reading and really loving Can You Forgive Her by Anthony Trollope. Oh my goodness, I'm so enjoying this and I'm so happy. This one is just a soap opera. It's entirely a soap opera, and I'm there for it. I'm about 240 pages in, I think, which is nothing. It's got like 600 more to go. But I am doing what I said I would do. I mapped it out, like how many pages. I need to read about 29 pages a night every night for 30 nights to get it done over the course of the month. And I've been reading about double that because I just get so into it. I love the story. It's so mundane and yet told with such clarity. It could be about, it could be about people today. It is about a woman who was in love with and engaged to her cousin. He made some poor choices. She ended up refusing him. Or they broke up, and she is engaged at the start of the book to another man. But she's going on a holiday with her cousin and his sister, also her cousin, and not taking her fiance. And her fiance is such a nice guy. He's such a nice guy. And that's kind of the problem. She's like, he's too nice. I'm not good enough for him. You know the song, You're Too Sweet for Me by... I can't remember who it's by, but I take my coffee black. I like my whiskey neat. You're too sweet for me. I can remember the lyrics, but not the musician. But that's what this is. She loves him. But she thinks he's too good. Not too good for her, just too good. And she doesn't want to commit. And so she breaks it off with him. And now I'm at the point where she's trying to just be her own independent self. She's just trying to be her own woman. She doesn't want to be anybody's wife. But her cousin, George, wants her back. And he's kind of trying to pursue her, but not scare her away. But he's got a reputation. And it's a well-earned one. And it's just, everything's up in the air, and I'm loving it. And then there's all, of course, the side stories. There's a character named Cheeseacre. Like, I love the name Cheeseacre. That's his last name. There's all these side stories, side characters, other things going on. There is a woman who is being pursued by, or wants to be pursued by, the same guy who's pursuing her old elderly aunt. It's just fun. It's a super, super fun book. I'm really enjoying it. And I'm really glad, because this opens up a whole new world for me with Anthony Trollope. He has so many books, and no, I won't love them all. I know that because I don't love the Barchester series, but I will love some. It wasn't just an Orley Farm thing, because I am also really genuinely loving Can You Forgive Her? So, of course, I also genuinely loved The Warden until we got to the end. So I'm reserving the right to then like totally turn this update on its head, but I love the book right now. I also read the Sophie Kinsella book. I'll put a picture of it here. I don't have it with me in my classroom. But last night, in one sitting, I read What Does It Feel Like by Sophie Kinsella. This is a very short little novella, I would say. Although it does call itself a novel. And this is autobiographical. It's based on a woman. It's fictional, but it's based on a woman who is a writer who's diagnosed with brain cancer and talking about what it feels like to have brain cancer. And the author's note really solidifies that a lot of what is in this book is true, or was true for Sophie Kinsella, is true for Sophie Kinsella. It is a hopeful book, but it's also a gut punch of a book. And I really, really loved it. It made me laugh. It made me cry. It really solidifies Sophie Kinsella as a truly wonderful writer, that she can develop these characters in less than 120 pages, and you feel so strongly for them. Really, really great. Highly recommend. Very sad, but also hopeful. Yeah. And then I am reading a bunch of other little things, which I will fill you in on later. This was just a quick check-in because I had a moment, and I haven't filmed anything yet for Victober. So this will get me going. It's already the 10th. It's the 10th of October. We're 10 days in, and this is my first little blurb of filming. I've been having a hard time doing these vlogs, just finding the moment that I want to be doing this. So, there's just not convenient moments, not very many convenient moments anymore. So I had one and I took it. And this is just a very short check-in, but Victober is going very well, very, very well. And I'm going to get back to work, I guess. And I will see you in a couple of minutes for you. Who knows how long for me. Hey, I just want to check in really quickly about what I have been reading. So I'm going to start with what I finished yesterday. That's Catriana by Robert Louis Stevenson. I don't have a copy of this book to show you, so I'm just going to put a picture here. I listened to the free audio version that was on Audible. I think it's being taken down soon, and that's good. It was a terrible audiobook, but it was a great book. It is the sequel to Kidnapped. I read Kidnapped last year and loved it, but it ended on a cliffhanger, a really big, it almost ends mid-sentence. and I needed to know what happened next. So I tracked down Catriana. I will be looking for a hard copy version of this in used bookstores, or I might just fork out the money to get a not used copy of Kidnapped that includes Catriana, because most editions publish them together as one book now. So I might just do that too. I don't know. I would like to read it, like actually read it, and not be plagued by this terrible audiobook version. It was just really poor quality, really scratchy and old. It almost sounded like it was a cassette tape that someone held a microphone to the speaker and recorded it and then put it up as an audiobook. That's what it sounded like. And also, it was incredibly monotonous. Like, the voice of the narrator talked like this the entire time, no matter what was happening in the book. And this is an adventure novel, and there are many crazy things happening, and everything was in the same monotone. And it was just terrible. It was terrible. So I gave it 3 stars, but I think it might actually be a 4 or 5 star book, but my experience with it was really rough. But I did finish it because I needed to know what would happen. And it does complete the story of Kidnapped. I won't say anything about the plot because it does pick up right where Kidnapped leaves off. It took Robert Louis Stevenson quite a bit of time to release the second half of this story. It almost didn't happen, I guess. And when he finally did, it had been such a long time that he does start Catriana with a complete summary of Kidnapped. So I wonder if that is still part of it when they're published together as one. I don't know, but it really helped me because, like I said, I hadn't read Kidnapped since last year. So highly recommend Kidnapped, and do read them back to back. Like, don't wait a year like I did, because you're going to want to know the conclusion. It's like stopping reading a book halfway through it, putting it on the shelf, and then coming back a year later. You don't want to do that. I also finished on my Kindle the new Adrien Young, which the name of is escaping me at the moment. I got an ARC copy of this, The Sea of Unspoken Things. I'll put a picture of it here. I got an ARC copy of this, and I think that I just need to accept that Adrien Young is not for me. I haven't really enjoyed much of what I have read by her. I have finished much of what I have read by Adrien Young. I have finished everything I've read by Adrien Young because I do want to know the story, but the writing is so... I know I'm going to offend somebody when I say this, but it's so boring. Her writing is so dull and slow. And in A Sea of Unspoken Things, it is incredibly atmospheric and incredibly slow as she sets up the story about this woman who returns to a place where her brother has died. And it's just this constant, like, she's got to solve a mystery. And it's just this constant setting up this feeling of loss. It's constant. We get it. We get it real fast. There's also a little bit of like a reunion, second chance romance storyline going on. And then in the last third of the book, it's so breakneck speed as everything comes together that it just really feels like it's 2 different books by 2 different people. And I don't like it. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't care about the characters. I felt like the vibe was the character, and it just wasn't for me. Now, I know that she is very, very loved. I know that most people really enjoy her work. Again, just not for me. Just not an author for me. There's nothing inherently wrong with this story or this book. If you want to read it, I highly, highly recommend it to you. But it was a weird feeling book. It felt weird. The very first thing I read, I actually read it in September, but it was on my October TBR, so I'm going to count it in October, was This Delight. This is The Broken Hearts Bakery by Carla Laurano, and this is so good. Look, I even tabbed it. This is a second chance romance, and it's the beginning of a trilogy of books. And in my November TBR, you're going to see me talk about the second book because I want to read it. and I already bought it. I loved this. This was very fall, perfect to read at this time of year. It's about a high-powered lawyer from a small town who's moved to LA, and she wants to use her law skills for good. In order to do that, though, she has joined a firm, has made a lot of money for this firm, but the agreement she has with this firm when she first starts there is that she gets to decide who she's going to serve. So she picks cases where she feels morally good about defending the person that she is working for. And she rejects cases where she doesn't feel good about it. So like divorce cases where the husband cheated or things like that, she refuses those cases. She refuses, and she does this so that she can, A, have a good reputation with her company. She's the highest earner there. And B, so she has the funding to do pro bono cases for women, specifically women. It doesn't have to be, I mean, not specifically women, but all the cases mentioned are women. But for women who can't afford a lawyer but need a good lawyer. So she does these pro bono cases. And the pro bono cases are where her heart is. There are people moving into an apartment in the building next door, but they have to use our staircase. And Lola's not having it. Lola is not having it. Hey Lola, enough. Anyway, she declines a high-profile client of theirs because she doesn't feel good about defending him and is put on leave. So she has to decide if while she's on leave, she has to decide if she's going to take his case and keep her job and lose her integrity, or keep her integrity and lose her job. And also gain a really bad reputation among other law firms and probably ruin her career. So does she ruin her integrity, her sense of self, or does she ruin her career? She has to decide. While this is going on, perfect timing, of course, she gets a call from her best friend back in their hometown that she doesn't really go to anymore because she's running away from things. And Lola, enough. Her best friend needs her to come back to the town and watch her teenage daughter for a while. Of course, when she gets there, she runs into the person that she's been running from all these years, her ex-high school college boyfriend, who she was very close to, who still loves her, and she, of course, still loves him. And slowly this romance re-unfolds. They're both older, they're both wiser, they both know themselves better, they both have a better sense of not only self, but the world. And they're more capable of truly loving each other. And so, of course, they end up back together because it is a second chance romance. But this is such a great book. It's so great. And each of these tabs represents just a scene that was like heart-melting. Not in a cheesy way. This isn't a Hallmark movie. This is really, really good writing. This is really great storytelling. It's very atmospheric. It's laugh out loud funny. It's heartwarming. And I highly recommend this. And then I finished Chains of Iron, which is the second book in the Last Hours Book 2 Shadowhunters series. This is the most recent trilogy in the Shadowhunters world. I don't know if it's the last one. I haven't read any of the other Shadowhunters novels. I've only read the first. This is just my second Cassandra Clare. And these are so fun. It is such a fun, weird, alternative history universe, London. It's so thrilling and fast-paced. Well, the pacing is a little bit weird. Cassandra Clare's writing is a little bit weird, but the story itself is phenomenal. It's this huge cast of characters, but you don't really get lost in them. There's all this politics and intrigue and romance and weirdness. I can't tell you much about this second book, but I do really enjoy these. My teenage self, these are YA, and my teenage self would have just inhaled these. I am really looking forward to reading the third and final one, and you will see it on my November TBR. So that is everything that I have read thus far in this month. I did finish Wuthering Heights, and I'm doing a totally separate, video about Wuthering Heights. I'm well into Can You Forgive Her? I veered into two Book of the Month choices that arrived, so I'll probably finish those fairly quickly. I am reading Dunked in Wood, but I don't plan on finishing it in October, but I'm reading that and it feels like a Dickens. It feels strange. It's about moles, but it feels strangely appropriate for Victober. What else am I reading? I'm looking over there because I have my stack of books on the sofa beside me. I don't know. I need to pick a couple of more. Now that I finished Wuthering Heights and Catriana, I need to pick a couple more Victorian books. Oh, I am also working through the short story collection. That's going really well. Some of them are big hits, some of them are big flops. I'll talk about that when I get to the end of the month. And I only have one story left in Elizabeth Gaskell's Gothic Tales. So I've been listening to the Gothic Tales on my walks to and from school. And then I have been reading, there's no audio for the short stories, but I've been reading one of those when I get home in the evening. Yeah, it's a phenomenal reading month right now. Absolutely phenomenal. Having the time of my life and really excited to keep going. I think I'll be a little bit sad when October ends because I won't have finished my TBR, but I'm really loving, like, it feels like gold. Every book I pick up feels like gold. So, well, except for the Adrien Young. So, yeah, I'm really enjoying myself. Let's film a November TBR. It's gonna be a doozy. It's a doozy of a TBR. I'll see you in a few seconds over there on that video. did not do the greatest job of keeping track of what I read and checking in with you This seems to have become a pattern ever since school started back up at the end of the summer. I just find it incredibly difficult now to find times when I feel like filming and can film. So I was thinking about it, and I was trying to figure out, like, what is different this school year from last school year. The workload is definitely different, but I think the biggest difference is that I just don't have time in my office and classroom alone ever this year. Either there are children in there or the people that I share the office with are in there. Whereas last year there was a whole lot more time where I didn't have anyone with me. And so I could just take a moment and do a quick check-in with you, and knew that I had that to rely on. And so when I would get home in the evening, it's also much darker when I get home in the evening right now, but when I would get home in the evening and I didn't want to film, I would just, last year think, well, I'll just talk about it tomorrow in my office. And I don't have that option anymore. And so it really just becomes like, I'll just film it right before I post the wrap up. I'll film all the stuff that I didn't get to film. So here we are once again with what is basically a sit down wrap up, parading as a vlog. I am sorry. But let's go ahead and do this very quickly. These are not in the order that I read them. They're just in the order they're stacked next to me. So I read The Book of Witching by C.J. Cook. I really enjoyed this. This is a dual timeline about two very different women involved in the same coven, I guess, people group. One is in very close to modern times, and she is a teenage girl, single mother, who is found burned almost to death in the woods while away on a hiking trip, on a camping trip with a friend and her boyfriend. And then the other is not a single mother, but her husband is away a lot, a mother raising two children in the 1500s or the 1600s, who is accused of witchcraft. Both of them are kind of haunted or hunted, even pursued by the Book of Witching, which is a book that cannot be destroyed, and it's chasing them both and demanding something of them. So how are they connected? What will be the outcome for these two women? How did they get into the scrapes that they're in? What is the Book of Witching? Where does it come from? The book is concerned with all of these things. This is at its heart, it is a mother-child story. It is a woman's empowerment story, or disempowerment. It's a story about, not every time, but in a way every time, in very different iterations. It is a story about men using women for personal gain, protection, in a very unsettling manner. That's all I'll say. I really enjoyed it. It's great. It was a great book for Halloween time. It was a great book for the fall. It's very well written. It's very readable. It's unputdownable. It gets a little bit creepy. A little bit gory. And like I said, the ending is very unsettling. Highly recommend if you like. It's not necessarily a horror. It's not a thriller either. It's definitely got the supernatural in there. It's a soft horror. It's an uncomfortable story. It's an uncomfortable book. We'll go with that. And I highly recommend it if you enjoy something that is going to make you think, is very engrossing and engaging, very quick-paced, dual timeline, strong female characters, not necessarily happy endings for everyone. Also, the woman from the past is based on a real woman from the past and her story. I finished the second book in the Raven saga, or the Raven cycle, not saga, the Raven cycle. And this series is not disappointing. I love it so much, and I'm so glad. If you haven't been here for this ride, I decided that I wanted to reread these physically for the first time since the pandemic started, at which point I had listened to them for the first time. So I listened to all 4 of them when we retreated into our homes, and I loved them. But I didn't know, that was my only engagement with them, and I didn't know if they were just the right thing at the right time, or if they truly were something that I really valued. And now I'm going back in. I read the first one, or reread the first one last month. I'm rereading the third one in November. I reread the second one in October, and I can't tell you anything more about them at this point than I have already told you about the first book, but it's so good, and I'm enjoying it so much. I popped in and out of Victorian Diaries, and this was amazing. I want to finish reading it. It's actually, for such a small book, it's actually pretty dense. There's like whole lifetimes in here in little snippets about different people. I read the whole of George Pegler, Headmaster, a young guy who in the 1890s, 1880s, 1850s, a young guy who in the 1850s, fairly young, gets his own school, and he's in charge of it, and he's like 24, and he's looking for a wife. So constantly he's writing about the women that he spoke to, and how vapid women are, and how he just wants somebody who he can talk to about books and smart things, but then he's really attracted to the girls that want to go ice skating, and and he seems to think that girls that want to go ice skating can't also be women who want to talk about books. And it's just really funny to watch him. Everything he writes is just so solid. He's so strong in his opinion and his resolution, and his conclusions, but then he goes back on it all the time. He's constantly contradicting himself, and for example, he's always attending these meetings to better himself, meetings about science and electricity. He attends so many meetings about electricity, meetings about spiritual matters, and he attends one lecture about the dangers of corporal punishment. And of course, he runs a school in a time when corporal punishment is a norm. Hitting people, corporal punishment meaning punishing through hitting, spanking, beating. And so he decides that he's going to hang up the bat. So he's not going to use the paddle anymore. And then a couple of days later, he's in there writing in his diary. He's like, oh, I gave up the paddle, but these children are so misbehaved that I must pull it back down. No, friend, you just don't have the skills to deal. And of course he blames the parents, like teachers blaming parents since 1850. It's really great. There are other ones in there, but that's the only one that I read the complete one of, and I will definitely be reading more out of that. I'm just going to keep it by the sofa over there and just pick it up when the whim strikes, because it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. It's like peeking through someone's window into the past. It's great. I am happy that I read this and that I own this, and I will probably never read this again. This is The Adventures of Alice LaSales by Alexandra Victoria, aged 10 3/4, and it is fascinating because it's an insight into little cloistered, not knowing she's going to be Queen of England, Victoria. But also it's written by a 10-year-old. So do with that what you will. I read this chunker of a glorious, glorious book. This is Anthony Trollope's Can You Forgive Her?, the first in the Palliser series, and I'm hooked. I absolutely loved this. This is my second year in a row of reading an Anthony Trollope that becomes a favorite read of the year, and I am here for it. I thought I wasn't an Anthony Trollope fan, but turns out I'm just really, really not a Barsetshire Barsetshire. I'm really not a Barsetshire person. Maybe now, I am curious now, maybe I'm just a different reader and I would go back. I did start to read Trollope when I was in the midst, the depths of reading all of Dickens in a year and a half. I read all of Dickens in a year and a half. So I was reading 1 to 2 of his novels a month, and I was deep in Dickens, and Dickens and Trollope are so different. And maybe, well, and also The Warden. I hated The Warden. I loved The Warden until the end of The Warden, and then I hated The Warden, and I had no trust for Trollope anymore. But now I've read Orley Farm, and I absolutely loved it last year. And I've read Can You Forgive Her, and I absolutely loved this. This is a slow melodrama, and yet it will make you laugh. I mean, the names alone. I feel like he was pulling from Dickens when he started naming some of these characters. For example, one man's last name is Cheeseacre. Oh, Mr. Cheeseacre. Yeah, I loved this book. This is the story, essentially, it is the story of some women in the 1800s trying to make their way through life, through the perils of life. One is the sister of one of the main love interests, and she suffers a lot of isolation and abuse, but she's also very meddly, like she gets into things, and she is in competition with her aunt, who is a recent, for male suitors. And her aunt is a recent widow, but she married someone much older than her, and she is quite young, so now she's this hot catch, and people are fighting for her attention. And then you've got Alice, the her of Can You Forgive Her? Well, I mean, they're all the her of Can You Forgive Her, but we have Alice. And Alice, oh goodness. Alice is engaged to the sweetest, kindest, most generous, most wonderful man on the planet, and it's boring. She's totally bored out of her mind. She sees herself in a much different way. She thinks that she has like an edge to her, a vibe. She thinks that she's got a rough side and that she will not be able to please him in his quiet ways. And she underestimates him, but she also overestimates herself, I think. She wants some danger. She wants like social standing. She wants angst, really. And so she was dating her cousin, who happens to be Alice, the first girl I mentioned, her brother. And he's a little bit abusive. He has like vices. And they broke up, and she was like, I will not deal with him anymore, but he's my cousin and he's my friend and we've been friends forever. And so before I get married, right after my engagement, me and my cousins, him being one of the two, are gonna travel, do a European tour together. Well, he hasn't given up on her. He loves her, and he's like, well, he says he loves her, and he's like pushing. He's pushing and pushing. And although she doesn't want to be with him, she also doesn't want to be with John. And she breaks it off with John, and she claims that she's not going to pick it back up with George. But then she does, and it's a mistake. It's a mistake. And it's a mess. And she creates this mess just because she's bored. I don't know. I don't get her. I don't get her very well at all. I don't get her. Like, honestly, I didn't care whether she ended up with John or George, because John is insufferably sweet and George is kind of gross. I was like, is there not a third option for this woman? Is there not someone else who is neither gross nor insufferably sweet? But no, she ends up with one of those two. And then there is Glencora. There's Glencora, Lady Glencora. And she, whoo, she does some not very acceptable things. She makes some choices that cause some havoc. In her life and in the lives of others. And I won't say anything else about that, but this is a melodrama. It's very kind of slow paced. It's very slice of life, but the slices that you're handed have a lot more spice in them than you might expect based on the pacing of the book. And so highly, highly recommend this. It was a joy. I read about 29 to 30 pages a night, and then I got to the end and just read like 100 pages because I just had to get to the end. I had to know what would happen. So love this, highly recommend. We'll pick up the next one, maybe even before Victober. I don't know. I think that they're kind of interrelated, but I don't think they're like progressive. I don't know. I'm not sure how they work, but I'll pick up the next one at some point next year. I read and loved Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy. I decided that I wanted to read this because I have loved, since I was a teenager, a Hallmark movie version of this, literally a Hallmark movie, back when Hallmark did not make 7,000 movies a year. And so a Hallmark movie actually meant something. And I think that they were played like maybe once every 3 or 4 months. A new one would be released and would play on like ABC or something like that. And a Hallmark movie was good quality with good actors and actresses. And it was a solid story, and it was something you looked forward to. They released them on DVD as the Hallmark Hall of Fame, and they were so different from what you would think of as a Hallmark movie now, of course. So when I was in my teens, one of those Hallmark Hall of Fame movies that was released was The Return of the Native, and it starred a very young Catherine Zeta-Jones and a bunch of other people. And I loved the story so much, but I never read the book. I never got to it. I read Tess first and The Woodlanders, and absolutely hated both of them. And was like, I am not reading any more Thomas Hardy. And so didn't get to it. But then a couple of years ago, the group read was The Mayor of Casterbridge, and I really loved that. And so this year I thought, you know what, I'm going to give another Thomas Hardy a try. I'm going to give it a try. And if I don't love it, I'll just pretend like the book doesn't exist, and I'll just hold on to the movie. And the movie is very angsty. It's very dark. But I still loved it, and I loved this book. This is the story of a woman who wants more from her life than she is going to receive. She's fighting so hard for romance and something beyond stability. I know it sounds terrible, but she wants to romanticize her life in a time where, you know, every day was, there was some task that was actually like survival or not survival that you had to partake in. She wanted to find someone who would sweep her off her feet, take her to Paris, give her this. She didn't need money necessarily. She needed to be adored, and she needed to be romanced, and she needed to be given the opportunity to live a life bigger than the life she saw before her. She wanted to see palaces and mirrors and gaslighting, and she wanted spectacle and beauty. And she didn't necessarily see that beauty in the countryside that she lived in. She thought she was made for better things. And so she has some affairs before she's married, and she manipulates some things, and she tries to marry the man who she's attracted to, who she can love, but who will also take her away from there. She picks the wrong guy. I mean, he might have, but he wanted to stay where they were. He had been to the places she wanted to be, but he wanted to stay where they were. And then, spoiler, he goes blind, and he has to really hunker down into life there, and she is going to have to really hunker down into reality and care for him and give up on her dreams, she thinks, and she can't take that. She cannot take that. And so she makes a pretty drastic decision. This is so beautifully done and so believable. I know, so I've taught so many girls like her, right? But at the time the girls that I teach now can take those dreams into their own hands, and they can try to make those dreams come true on their own in a much more socially acceptable, expected even way than Eustacia Vi could even imagine. She is still very much reliant upon finding a male to be the conduit for her life. And when she makes a choice that is a man who cannot be that conduit for a million different reasons, even though he can give her love and she loves him, even though he can provide her with stability, even though she could make a beautiful, beautiful life, it's not the dream. It's not the dream she wanted, and she was not able to let go of that desire for something very different from her reality. It's very good. It's very good. I'm speaking cryptically, but also probably giving way too many spoilers about it, but I highly recommend it. It's very good. Not for the faint of heart, as I say about all Thomas Hardy. I read A Curious Beginning, and this was not for me. I will not be continuing on with this, I don't think. I may pick up the second book and see how it goes. I understand that one of the goals of this is to present a strong female character in the Victorian period, and it does that. But it works a little too hard. Rayborn is working much too hard to make, what's her name? Obviously it's Veronica Speedwell. It's literally the name on the cover. Oh dear. So Veronica Speedwell. Rayborn is working way too hard to make Veronica Speedwell make you know that she's smart and she's sassy and she doesn't adhere to social norms and she's all these things. She's outside. She's not like the other girls. I don't mind not like the other girls stories. I really don't. I often feel like I'm not like the other girls. I can relate. But oh my goodness, this book is over the top with trying to make you remember at every turn that she's a step ahead. She's amazing. She's so beautiful, so coquettish, so desirable, so intelligent, so fun, so wild, so unpredictable. Just let the girl breathe for a minute. Just let her be a human being for a minute. This book was exhausting to me. I did not enjoy my time with it. And I am assuming that the banter between Speedwell and what's his name? Speedwell and Stoker, the never-ending, non-stop, continuous, biting, sarcastic banter becomes sweeter or something as this progresses, but as it stands now, it was like, no. They never actually like treat each other like people that they like. I like sarcasm. I'm incredibly sarcastic. I'm so sarcastic. I like sarcasm, but I also like sincerity. And you never get sincerity in this whole book. And I'm sure you get it at some point in the scheme, the grand scope of this story. But it didn't draw me in. it turned me off. I read these. I read 30 of these, one each night until the end of the month. And some of them were great and some of them were terrible. And some of them I skimmed because they were way too long. And some of them I will remember forever. I would highly recommend picking this up and just jumping in and out. I'm not going to rate this. I'm not going to talk about each story. I read 30 of them, but I would highly recommend that you have this in your collection and that it be something that you dip in and out of. I wouldn't necessarily recommend 30 in a month. I wouldn't do that again. But I will definitely revisit some of these, and at a slower pace, I think I'll love them even more. Some of the highlights, so I'm not going to tell you about each one, but some of the ones that I really enjoyed were Reality or Delusion from 1868 by a Mrs. Henry Wood. I don't know who that is. Charles Dickens from 1865, To Be Taken with a Grain of Salt, was really fun. The Anonymous story from 1878, The Story of Clifford House, was great. E. Nesbit's 1891 story, John Charrington's Wedding, was really great. And then F.G. Loring, I have no idea who that is, but in 1900, they published The Tomb of Sarah, which I also really enjoyed. These were great. Like there were some really, really surprisingly great stories in here by people I've never heard of ever. And it kind of gave me a jumping off point for doing a little bit of research into some of these authors. A lot of them, I can't find anything else really by them, but a couple, I think I may have found some things to read for next year for Victober. So that's super fun. And that's one of the great things about short story collections. I read the first book in the Dark is Rising series. This is Oversea Under Stone by Susan Cooper. And this was a very quick read, very enjoyable, very middle grade. I will read the second one during middle grade March. And much like I'm doing with, I always think of it as The Mysterious Howling. That's the name of the first book. The Kids Raised by Wolves. Every year I read one book in that series. This year I'm on my third book in that series. And now every year I'm going to read the next book in the All of a Kind family series, because I read the first one last year and I really loved it. And now I'm going to continue on with this series and read one each middle grade March until I'm done with the series. So The Dark is Rising sequence, Oversea Under Stone. I can't believe I've never read these before. So good. So good. If you enjoy, it's a little bit like fantastical, like Harry Potter, a little bit, but I would relate this more to the kind of tone and storytelling you might find in C.S. Lewis in the Chronicles of Narnia. It feels a little bit more like that, but it's very different, incredibly different. But the way the story unfolds feels a little bit more akin to Narnia storytelling. And I really enjoyed this. I'm just going to look at the back. It is about the two great forces of light and dark. It says on the back, they've battled for control. And now these kids, Simon, Jane, and Barney, they're on vacation in Cornwall and they're going to get pulled into this. And there are hilarious instances. There are harrowing events and a lot of strong like family values and teamwork and trust and this pull between light and dark sides. I also read, and I don't think I told you about it yet, but on my Kindle, I got an art for Sarah Hogel's The Folklore of Forever. And I read the first book in this series, Old Flames and New Fortunes, earlier this year. And then I got the sequel to it. The second, I think there will be 3 or 4 books in the series. But I got the second one, The Folklore of Forever. I really enjoyed Old Flame and New Fortune. This was a second chance romance. It's about a group of sisters that live in kind of a magical town. Magic plays a part in this world for sure, and the sisters think of themselves as witches kind of in a way, but it's like the movie Practical Magic. So think of it in that way. It's not like Harry Potter, it's like practical magic. And In the first one, it's a second chance romance, and it's hilarious and also heartwarming, and I really enjoyed it. The Folklore of Forever, though, was so good. Oh my goodness, I loved it so much. This book, it is about one of the sisters who really rejects her family's witchy identity. She writes historical fiction, and she reads a lot of nonfiction history. She's really zoned in on what's real. And she, for some reason, just really rejects that part of her family's life, and then has to move back to the town and encounter people who believe in magic all the time, including her family. And she's being pursued by a neighbor who, Morgan is his name, but he wants her, he's attracted to her, but also he wants her because he believes she's a witch, and that in order for him to have powers, he has to be with a witch because he's not a witch. And so he keeps trying to like woo her, and it's not working. It's pretty hilarious. But there's this other guy who she's kind of attracted to who doesn't really follow through on things. It's very mysterious. And so she's got these two people, but there's also other storylines, a storyline about her niece, a storyline about herself remembering who she actually is, a story about family, a story about like family identity. It's such a beautiful, beautiful book. It's so funny, so heartwarming, reads so quickly. I love this series, and I love Sarah Hogle. I fell in love with Sarah Hogle when I read a Christmas book by her, which was just bonkers crazy, and really, really was like, this woman is weird. So this is the perfect kind of series for her because she can have her characters, she can have weird, otherworldly, magical realism things happen, but she's really dealing with human interaction, and it's beautiful, and I love it. I love it. So I recommend the series. You can get this one now. The one that I read that I just oohed and awed over is coming out in April or May of next year. It's on NetGalley. You could try to get a copy. And then probably the absolute highlight of this reading month was Wilkie Collins's Man and Wife. I literally like read this with my mouth hanging open half the time. I couldn't believe what was taking place. It starts with a prologue. You're in the recent past. And there is a man who's married a slightly older, and when he pursued her and married her, she'd been like a singer on the stage. So she was kind of wild. And she had a best friend who went off to become the wife of someone over in India. This is during the East India Company. It's during the Raj. And a lot of women in Victorian England did just hop on ships and go over there to find a husband. And a lot of men were over there making their fortune off of the fortune and the wealth and the incomes of the Indian people. But they were over there making their fortune. And so one of these girls goes over to India to become the wife of a person over there. And the other becomes a singer and has a life on the stage. She meets this guy. He's a little bit younger than her. He pursues her pretty strongly. They end up needing to get married. They're married. They have a happy life, except that he wants to rise in the ranks of society. And because of who she is, he feels like he can't do that. He feels like she holds him back. Even though she was everything he wanted, he no longer wants her. But he hires a lawyer to find some loopholes to see if he could get out of this marriage. And in the 1800s, it was very difficult, unless you were extremely wealthy, to get out of a legal church-binding marriage. But the lawyer does find a loophole because the Irish law, they got married in Ireland, and the Irish law was very particular about converts to Catholicism who get married in the Catholic Church. They happened to not meet the criteria at the time, and this was an oversight by a young priest who was maybe performing his first or very close to his first marriage ceremony and was not fully aware of all of the laws or didn't fully investigate the length of time this man had been a Catholic convert. And he had converted just to marry her because she required that. So long prologue short, he has found someone else that he would rather be with. He's found someone else, and so he wants to lose his family. He wants to lose his wife and children. And he's got this lawyer who tells him, actually, you were never legally married. Your children are not actually, they're your children, but they're illegitimate. And this woman who you've been living with, yeah, she's illegitimate too. She's your mistress, not your wife. And so you can walk away from them and have no repercussions socially, and they will be ruined. It's super fun, right? And he does it. And the rest of the book is the story of the daughters of those two women and some Scottish marriage laws. And it's so thrilling, this book. It moves so quickly, and there's humor, there's laughter, there's just, there's such realistic interactions. I'm just going to read you a couple of things that I don't think will be spoilery at all, but just to get the feel. So sometimes our good friend Wilkie Collins bores me to tears, and I DNF because I just can't make any progress in the story that he's telling. And this time, with the Moonstone as well, and The Woman in White, of course, his two most famous, but this should be up there among those. That sometimes I can't put him down. And this was I can't put him down. I was in love with these characters. I needed to know. There is a point about a third of the way into the book, maybe a little bit further of the way into the book, where I was literally reading it going, no, 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 no. And I can't tell you why. So good. So good. Okay, I just want to read you a little bit here. So Arnold and Blanche, they have a little burgeoning romance, and it says, Arnold and Blanche were left together. Among the personal privileges which nature has accorded to women, there are surely none more enviable than their privilege of always looking their best when they look at the man they love. When Blanche's eyes turned on Arnold after her uncle had gone out, her uncle is a hoot. He is hilarious. But after her uncle had gone out, not even the hideous, fashionable disfigurements of the inflated chignon and the tilted hat could destroy the triple charm of youth, beauty, and tenderness beaming in her face. Arnold looked at her and remembered, as he had never remembered yet, that he was going by the next train, and that he was leaving her in the society of more than one admiring man of his own age. The experience of a whole fortnight passed under the same roof with her had proved Blanche to be the most charming girl in existence. Ooh, a whole fortnight. It was possible that she might not be mortally offended with him if he told her so. He determined that he would tell her so at that auspicious moment. But who shall presume to measure the abyss that lies between the intention and the execution? Arnold's resolution to speak was as firmly settled as a resolution could be, and what came of it? Alas for human infirmity, nothing came of it but silence. I mean, truth. You're like, I know exactly what I want. This is what I want. I'm going to get what I want. I'm totally and completely determined. And yeah, I'm not going to say anything about it. That's what I want. Nobody will ever know. He does find his voice. He does find his voice. And it is adorable and hilarious. He does find his voice because she kind of helps him. She's like, you don't look at your ease. Arnold began to see his way at an immeasurable distance, but still he saw it. Sir Patrick is a terrible old man, he answered. Just before you came in, he discovered one of my secrets by only looking in my face. He paused, rallied his courage, pushed on at the hazards, and came headlong to the point. I wonder, he asked bluntly, whether you take after your uncle. In other words, my uncle guessed that I'm in love with you, and he guessed it just by looking at my face. Can you also guess it so I don't have to say it? He said bluntly. Sir Patrick, oh wait, no, I already read that bit. Blanche instantly understood him. With time at her disposal, she would have taken him lightly in hand and led him by fine gradations to the object in view. But in 2 minutes or less, it would be Arnold's turn to play. They're playing croquet. He is going to make me an offer, thought Blanche, and he has about a minute to do it. He shall do it. What? She exclaimed. Do you think the gift of discovery runs in the family? Arnold made a plunge. I wish it did, he said. Blanche looked the picture of astonishment. Why? She asked. If you could see in your face what Sir Patrick saw. No, if you could see in my face what Sir Patrick saw. He had only to finish the sentence, and the thing was done. But the tender passion perversely delights in raising obstacles in itself. A sudden timidity seized on Arnold exactly at the wrong moment. He stopped short in the most awkward manner possible. Blanche heard from the lawn the blow of the mallet on the ball and the laughter of the company at some blunder of Sir Patrick's. The precious seconds were slipping away. She could have boxed Arnold on both ears for being so unreasonably afraid of her. Arnold made another plunge. He answered, You would see that I want a little encouragement. From me? Yes, if you please. Blanche looked back over her shoulder. The summer house stood on an eminence approached by steps. The players on the lawn beneath were audible but not visible. Any one of them might appear unexpectedly at a moment's notice. Blanche listened. There was no sound of approaching footsteps. There was a general hush, and then another bang of the mallet on the ball, and then a clapping of hands. Sir Patrick was a privileged person. He had been allowed, in all probability, to try again, and he was succeeding at the second effort. This implied a reprieve of some seconds. Blanche looked back again at Arnold. Consider yourself encouraged, she whispered, and instantly added, with the ineradicable female instinct of self-defense, within limits. Arnold made a last plunge, straight to the bottom this time. Consider yourself loved, he blurted out, without any limits at all. It was all over. The words were spoken. He had got her by the hand. Again, the perversity of the tender passion showed itself more strongly than ever. The confession which Blanche had been longing to hear had barely escaped her lover's lips before Blanche protested against it. She struggled to release her hand. She formally appealed to Arnold to let her go. Arnold only held her tighter. Do try to like me a little, he pleaded. I am so fond of you. I loved this book. I loved this book. It is wild. It is a wild, wild ride and so incredibly readable and so, I don't know. It is a favorite reader of the year. I am going to say it. It is a contender for my favorite read of the year. It is up there against Ministry of Time and Sharkheart, which are both still contenders for my favorite read of the year. But now there is a third, and that is Man and Wife. I absolutely loved this. Cannot recommend it enough. Glorious, glorious revelation to me. Thanks once again to the wonder that is Victober. So this was an absolutely glorious Victober. I read so many books. I read so many things that I loved. I definitely didn't get to everything. Not even all of my Victober reads. I did not get to, after Catriana and the terrible experience with that audiobook, I couldn't make myself pick up the second Robert Louis Stevenson book that I had on my list, but I will read it next year. And then I started Lilith, but I didn't really get too far into it, so I'm going to hold off on that. I don't know if I'll wait till Victober to read that. I might try to fit it in. I think it'll work nicely in maybe December or January. So I'm still going to read that fairly soon, but I didn't get to it in October. I didn't get far enough into it to feel like I should finish it in November before I start my November TBR. I did not get to Wilder's Hand, which surprises me so much. I just didn't feel like picking it up, but I had already read a Lefanu short story. I listened to a Lefanu short story, and that might have just like quenched my Lefanu thirst. So I don't know if I will wait again until Victober to read Wilder's Hand, but I might. I don't know. I know that I want to read these books very much, but I didn't get to them in October, and it just didn't feel right to get to them in October. So, there's a bunch of books that were not Victober related that I also did not get to, but I'm super pleased with what I did read. Great reading month, and now it's the 2nd of November, and I am gonna finish my first book. I'm gonna finish Emily Climbs today. I read half of it yesterday. It's so readable. It's so quick, and I love it so entirely much. But I will also tell you that I am already failing at only reading one book at a time. So I'm just wanting to read what I want to read. So I'm reading Emily Climbs, which I'll finish. And then I am also reading A Fragile Enchantment, which I am loving. It's supposed to be the 3rd book that I read this month, but I'm reading it right now. And I am also listening to Miranda Hart's latest book, which is a memoir and also a look into mental health. And it's really beautiful, and I'm absolutely loving it. I'm excited. I have it, the audiobook became available in the States before the physical book, because the physical book and the audiobook were released in England at the same time, and Audible just carried the audio for us. And so I only have the audio right now, but there are so many things I want to highlight and dig deeper into. So I'm very excited that in January I have the physical book coming as a pre-order, and I will reread it in physical form again at that time. But for right now, I'm just voraciously listening to this book. It's so relatable and heartening and heartwarming and hilarious. She is hilarious. And she keeps having us stop and listen to Tina Turner songs. And when she does that, I actually do. I actually go and listen to a Tina Turner song, and it's a joy. So, yeah. November reading is off to a great start. I am utterly failing at reading only one book at a time, and loved Victober. So for now, let's go read.